Hello, welcome to another hobby chat with Adam's Hobby Stuff, and today I'm talking about paint pots. There's always a lot of noise in the community about how dropper bottles are far better than Games Workshop pots. Games Workshop pots are evil, and just nowhere near as good because you waste paint, they dry up, etc. So I just want a bit of a chat about that really. You see here I've just grabbed a few out of my box I'm using at the moment. Dropper bottles ranging from Flames of War stuff, which I think is actually Vallejo paint. It is. The Army painter used the dropper bottles as well, and obviously there's the good old Vallejo one. So I use a mix, a few different manufacturers. I've got some others that do, and then there's kind of three styles of the Games Workshop pots. The kind of what you would call standard size, that they put everything from like here Death Guard green into actually they use it for liquid green stuff. Just on the side there, slightly larger version which contrast paints are in, and then they seem to put the technical paints in these much larger pots. Now, I have problems with both of these pots, and I think they're a good solution for certain things as well. Both of them are. What's the problems? So I think the traditional problem is with Games Workshop, they say, oh, they dry up and they fade away and they don't last very long, etc. So I'm going to show you a paint pot here that, this is probably one of my oldest of the newer style. It's not quite sealed at the back properly. Now, I got about a dozen of these when the Conquest magazine, not Conquest, the other one, the one before that, where the Space Marines and the Nurgle were in it, and you got it as a part work every couple of weeks. And I was one of those guys that bought multiple copies of the magazine because you got a lot of intercessors and whatever, you could build a squad up and end up with a lot of Retributor armour. Now, if we look at this and we pop this pot open, only because I used it earlier, if you can see in there, there's not a lot left in there actually. It's almost completely used, and the pot is relatively I say clean, a couple little bits built up around the edge. So to say that you can never use every last bit of Games Workshop paint and the pots always dry up is not technically true. Also to say that, you know, these dropper bottles never dry out is also not true. Now, I haven't got a dried out one. I might have a dried out one because I've probably got about 150 of these knocking around in different colours, and I'm not going to check them all. But I think it's how you care for your paints, and also both of these types of paint pot can go wrong. Now I'm going to show you some other paints. I'm going to drag over my painting tray and just really show you. And I realised I've made some of these paints go wrong as well with my Vallejo. So I'll show you the gone wrong for both, and then I'll talk about how I stop it and how I've made a Games Workshop paint pot last till it's nearly dry. And the same thing with some of those Vallejo and dropper bottles, because the Flames of War one we showed there, that one, it's not reused very much, but that must be 12-year-old at a guess, still absolutely fine. I've got some very similar, so we'll drag it over and we'll take a look. So this is just my tray that I'm working on at the moment. I'll change the camera angle in fact while we're at it. So this is my paint station, currently not set up in a doing any kind of hobby tutorial kind of format. I'm just doing another War Dog actually, painting that because I'm going to a tournament the weekend. I think I've mentioned it on the channel a few times, and realised the setup of War Dogs and averages I had knocked me slightly over the 2,000 points. Now normally if you play mates it wouldn't care, but going to a tournament you can't be 20 points over, so I had to run out and buy another War Dog, and I'm just sort of quickly painting that, doing some Necromunda bits as another part. So this War Dog video will be up on Sunday, and then the Goliath video will probably be up the week after that. Not very good lighting, so I'm not going to really show them off. I'm going to move my brew though onto the table. Don't do these videos without a cup of tea, and you'll drink tea a lot. So, the bad of the Flames of War. So I'm going to show you one of these paints. Now I happen to know that this one is messed up because I was using it for my Goliath. I've not used it for a while. I do use yellow quite a lot. Again, this is a probably 12-year-old paint, Flames of War. I've not done Flames of War for a while. But I know this one's messed up because I've just been in it. I didn't clean it, specifically because I thought, well, I can talk about it on the video. So if we open this up, this might go everywhere. You can see actually the lid is full of paint, it's crusted all around there. Now this effectively is what happens in the Games Workshop paints, except when it crusts with the workshop paint it's very hard to get the lid back on, and that's what starts the drying out process. Now if you do find that this has happened with your Vallejo paint, you can either do it with a hobby knife, use a manky one. I've been chopping up some milliput with this. I'm going to try and get this lighting better. And you can just then scrape the paint off. Now if it's not properly set, you might be able to do this actually just with a piece of tissue and just rub it off. And then once it's off, you can then clean the top like that, and it's sort of good as new. Just scrape out a couple of the little details. Now obviously you have got the issue, and this is my biggest beef with these pots. If you get any paint into the lid, you've got to clean it out. So how do you clean it out? Well, that's dead simple. Again, toilet roll is your friend. roll it into a little kind of point, and you stuff it in there and just twist it around and keep twisting until you feel like you've done enough twisting. And there you go, paint's out. Not 100% clean, but obviously that gives you the idea of how to do it. 10 more seconds, you'd have that perfect, and we're back to use. But how does it mess up like that in the first place? Now, whenever you're using a paint pot, you're going to need to shake the paint to mix it. So just give it, a few seconds of shaking. Now, what you should then do after you've shaken it is leave it for the paint to settle and run out of the nozzle. If you don't, and I'm going to put this in here because I'm going to use some of this yellow at some point, I'm sure. If you don't, and you just open it now, there can be a tendency of it bubbling out. I don't think I did it quick enough. So if you were to do that and then go on rushing, you do that, you pour your thing, and it can sometimes over bubble. Oh, it hasn't this time. Typical. There you go. So you try and do something live, it shows you. But that is how it will go wrong, or can potentially go wrong. I'm going to try and find a pot that was doing it earlier. Let's have a go with some flat flesh. I've used that already on this one. Let's have a look. See if that's going to do it. Oh, it's a bit manky, but it's not, is it? Oh, here we go. But that can be how it happens. If you open it too much, it bubbles up, comes out. I'm not doing a good demonstration of how they go wrong, but it doesn't go wrong very often, hence why they last a bit longer. Now, you've got a similar issue with workshop paint pots. So if we were to look at a slightly more full one, which I haven't got to hand, annoyingly, we'll go with Death Guard Green. If you were to open a pot, shake it first, obviously. If you don't leave it time to settle and flow out of the lip, you open it up, do it very carefully, and you see it there, it's running on the lip, and it will run behind the lip there, that you can see, and go and crust around the lid, which obviously it's done at some point here, just a little bit around there. But that's the same process, same principle. Get yourself a knife, pop it, scour it out, use a bit of tissue, and there you go, you're back to being good as normal. So they both have the same drawbacks. They will both dry out if you don't treat them properly. Bit of cleaning up every now and then, and always have a damp cloth to one side because you're going to get it on your fingers like I have. Keep that to one side and just clean your pots. Now, these will dry out more if you leave them open. The advantage of a dropper bottle, I suppose, is that you have to use it, put it onto the palette and put it to one side because you can't paint from the bottle. With the workshop paints, I think the reason they dry out so much and people don't really register is they'll open it, they'll use a brush to take the paint out and put it onto the palette, which I've already done previously. You use an old brush, use a wet palette or a normal palette. If you leave it open like this and you paint from that pot, it will dry out. Obviously it's open to the air, so if you're doing this and you're painting, one, you're not thinning your paints down if you do this, so your paint's going to go thicker, you're going to use more. It will dry out, so always put it onto a palette. I always recommend a wet palette. I'll maybe do another video on wet palettes at some point. Close up as fast as possible. Now that is not doable with stuff like your technical paints, because if you were to put a technical paint onto a wet palette, it starts causing problems, and your contrast paints as well. I prefer using them from the lip of the pot, but because they're contrast and they're more of a wet paint, you don't seem to get the build up around the edge. So try not to use them from the pot unless they're these ones, you kind of have to, but then keep them open for as least time as possible. Now you can get some contrast medium, they sell it separately to workshop, or you can get it from other suppliers and just drop a bit back in there to water it down. Same thing with your normal paints. The advantage of these, I suppose, is if they do start drying out, you can water them down again and bring them back to life. So I don't know what I'm trying to sort of say here, other than both sets of paint pots have their problems. Both sets of paint pots has their advantages. The big disadvantage actually with the Vallejo paint or the dropper bottle paint is the washes. You have to pour them out onto a counter or something like that because you can't paint straight from the pot. So I find actually these are more wasteful when you're using inks and things, unless of course you have it open and you knock it over, which as every Instagram and internet meme you will see happens all the time. So I suppose I'm really not, am I saying I've got a preference? I haven't really, so this is kind of just a bit of a ramble of a video. I haven't got a preference for either of these styles of pots. I think they've both got their strengths, they've both got the weaknesses, and they both definitely have a place. Would I go to all the effort of decanting all my workshop pots into dropper bottles? Absolutely not. I think you would waste so much paint transferring across, or not so much, but you would waste some. It almost makes it not worth the effort. The amount you're probably going to spend on pots, they're not that expensive, but to spend money on pots, you're spending money you could buy another paint on. And like I said, I have paints that are multiple years old. I think I've got actually back here, my Crag Blue that I was using for the Orlocks I'm painting up. Now this one is, again, same thing, very near to empty. I don't know if you can see in there. The light's gone wrong, but again, very near to empty. And this is the same thing. This is probably 5 or 6 years old at minimum. In fact, it must be, because I was working down in London when I bought this, again, as part of that part work set. So you can make them last for a number of years. You can make them not dry out. It's just about taking care of them. Now, this one actually is probably in a worse condition of some of my others. So just again, little bit, take the paint off the edges and then seal the pot back up, and then you'll be good to go, and it'll last, you know, forever. And there's not much actual life left in this one because it's nearly empty. So I will stop waffling there because I'm definitely going around in circles. But in the great paint pot debate of Games Workshop pots are evil, they're not. Take care of them, be absolutely fine. In the great world of dropper bottles are amazing and nothing goes wrong with dropper bottles, well, I've just shown you stuff does go wrong with dropper bottles occasionally. You will have all had the dropper bottle splodge if you've used dropper bottles quite a lot. I'm determined to find one that'll do it. I'm going to have a last chance to see if one. That's a nice and clean one, actually. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. They all have their place in the hobby. I'm not going to do it, is it? Determined to make it fail, and it won't on camera. So look, yeah, that's about it. That's all I've got to say, really. Just all pots are fine. All pots are equal. It's about how you take care of them. If you're clumsy and you open a pot up and paint from it and knock it over, clearly these are going to be worse. If you're fairly careful with your pots, these are great, and the advantages to both. This was a bit cungy there. Going to stop waffling now. Right, I always do a bit where I talk about what I've spent my hobby money on this week, and not a great deal of purchases this week. I had a bit of a last minute panic purchase when I said I realised that I was going to this tournament I talked about. So I bought, you've just seen one of them already built, I've bought some Armiger Warglaves, and this is to convert to my Nurgle army. Obviously one's already been done to that, so it's going to go on there so I can attend this tournament. And the other one is still in there with no idea what I'm going to do with it. I do have some necromundry plans for it though. So watch this space. So yeah, hope you enjoyed all that. Like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. Check me out on Instagram and Facebook, and you can see what I've been working on a little bit more in detail. I'll see you in another video.